What's up, everybody? Thanks for hanging out with us. It's Danny Parkins and Andrew Fillipponi on another edition of First and Pod. It's an off season, which means we create the content. There is not news to react to. We create the news. Subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. Let's make this pod grow. There's room to grow here. Pony, first of all, hello. How are you?
My city won the draft this week. It'll come here in 2026. I have absolutely zero interest in attending other than maybe day 3, because at that point you can just people watch and take in the spectacle of the whole thing. I am someone that is meticulous about the draft. I like to have my paperwork. I like to have my rankings out. I like to hear the analysts. I like to be bunkered down, sequestered. So the idea of being like one of those screaming lunatics that just gets excited about my team's pick or boos my team's pick is at this point in life not an experience that I find all that interesting or enticing. So I'll be there if my bosses make me go, but I have no interest personally in being a part of the draft celebration.
No, I mean, it was cool to go to do shows from a remote media location, but standing around with 250,000 other people to hear a name be called is not my idea of a good time. And it's unbelievable how the NFL has convinced so many people that that's the place to be. It's pretty insane. It was, and by the way, for the people watching, it was spectacular because you just see, you know,
a lot of good-looking women.
No. You see a lot of super fans. You see a lot of guys in Jets helmets and shoulder pads.
Face paint is prominent.
Face paint. Zubaz, capes. Capes is a very popular accessory. It's quite a collection of humanity. And by the way, they are our listeners, so thank you. Subscribe.
Yes, we love you. Okay, so we're ranking all 32 coaches today.
Yeah.
I have my master list in front of me. I'm going to give you the honorary first pick. It's an easy pick. This is like a draft with LeBron James or Victor Wembanyama or Trevor Lawrence or Caleb Williams or Sidney Crosby.
Or Andy Reid.
Or Andy, yes, Andy Reid. Congratulations for making the easiest pick.
Yeah, thank you.
Making him the number 1 ranked coach.
Listen, I think we'll at some point have to do some debates on, like, are we doing it for accomplishment or if you were starting a team tomorrow? Obviously, if we were strictly saying starting a team tomorrow, there'd be some pushback here because of age, but he's not slowing down. There's like literally 6 different quarterbacks who have had career years with Andy Reid: Jeff Garcia, Kevin Kolb, Alex Smith, Mike Vick, obviously Patrick Mahomes. So he's a quarterback maximizer. He's a play calling and play design wizard. He can get the malcontent to perform well. So you can draft like the character concern guys and he can wrap their arms around them and put them in a situation to succeed. So he's clearly number 1, and there's a gap between number 1 and number 2.
I would agree with that. All right, so number 2 for me is the coach that he beat in the Super Bowl, Kyle Shanahan. Yeah, there's going to be other coaches on this list that have more hardware and have been a part of Lombardi celebrations and Super Bowl parades. But a lot of the points you made about Andy Reid, I think, now count for Kyle Shanahan. Brock Purdy, development, winning, and going to a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo, taking guys who were not first-round picks necessarily, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, making them work and turning them into stars in his offense, surrounding himself with very smart people and becoming one of these guys who produces coaches who go on to bigger and better things. So I'm going to go with him. Number 2, usually I don't like to put guys without championships this high on the list, but having gone to 2 of the last 5 Super Bowls and coming very close to knocking off Patrick Mahomes in his prime, I'm going to give Kyle Shanahan the nod, number 2 ranked coach in the league.
Yeah,
Would that have been your pick?
It would have been. It would have been quarterback maximizer, brilliant offensive mind. Electing to receive in overtime, blowing double-digit leads in Super Bowls. These are not great characteristics, but
No.
if you're in the Super Bowl with Brock Purdy, you're pretty damn good. So I can't hate it. He would have been the pick, but I did consider Sean McVay, who was the third pick in the draft. Sean McVay is a wizard. He is brilliant. And yes, he has Matt Stafford, who is spectacular. But this guy just gets the job done. He made Puka Nacua great. He made Cooper Kupp great. This is anecdotal. I don't have the measurements for this, but do you watch a team that has more receivers running wide open than the Rams?
The 49ers.
Really 49ers would be in that conversation, but they've got more elite talent that it feels like that, it feels like Deebo Samuel and George Kittle would be great and Brandon Ayuk would be great regardless of system. I'm not sure I can say the same thing for the guys that I've seen Sean McVay scheme open on the Rams. So this was a pretty easy call for me. There was a question of 3 and 4, but I'm going to go with the brilliant offensive mind.
And he was doubted. I was trying to tell you all offseason, everyone's sleeping on the Rams. They had 5 wins, Super Bowl hangover. All kinds of injuries conspired against them in 2022. And all the retirement talk, people thought he was mailing it in. So I thought last season, Stafford getting healthy did a lot to restore his reputation among the elite coaches in the NFL. I think I'm going to surprise you with 4. I think 4 is going to go a little off the board. You're going to hate this pick because of who he coaches. But who he did it with last year and how close they came to actually getting to the NFC Championship game has to be putting Matt LaFleur 4 on this list. The Jordan Love development, he is no longer a byproduct of Aaron Rodgers. So starting his career with 13-win seasons and the response being, well, he's only doing it because of Aaron Rodgers, that went out the window last year because of the work he did with Jordan Love, the youngest offense in the NFL. The defensive coordinator was a problem. He replaced him. Now we'll see about Hafley. Doesn't exactly have a long resume in the NFL. But this goes back to your question. If I'm just looking at coaches currently in the NFL and not judging them based on what they did necessarily back in 08 or 09 or something like that, I love what Matt LaFleur is right now. What have you done for me lately? He's my coach number 4.
I had him 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a Bears fan.
Dude, I have no problem with the pick. I had him 5. His ability to adjust and have it be seamless going from Rodgers to LaFleur, but also make the McCarthy to him adjustment seamless for Rodgers, and get more out of Rodgers than McCarthy was getting out of him at the end is he is an excellent coach. He had the youngest receiver group in NFL history last year, youngest team in the NFL. They hung 48 in a playoff game last year. I have no problem with Matt LaFleur for that pick. I have zero issue with it.
Let's start making some picks that offend us. Let's start doing some things here that piss each other off.
Well, I mean, this is a guy in your division, but it's not your coach. I will take John Harbaugh for the 5th best coach in the NFL. I give him a lot of credit for being a guy without a specific expertise as a former special teams guy who's been able to have the degree of consistency and success that he had. I respect the different number of players that he's won with. It's pretty hard to, completely change your scheme around Lamar Jackson and then also change your scheme again with Lamar Jackson and hire Todd Monken and get another MVP season out of him. He hired Mike McDonald, and then that guy became the hottest defensive prospect at coaching in the NFL. He overachieves. He hires good coordinators. He wins with different systems. He's solid in game. John Harbaugh to me was a pretty easy top 5 pick here.
They got 2 playoff wins since they won the Super Bowl, or 3 playoff wins since they won the Super Bowl in 2012. They beat the Steelers in a playoff game, and then they beat Tennessee with Lamar Jackson, and they beat they obviously won the playoff game last year against Houston. That's it. So he's the overachieving is fine if you limit it to the regular season, but I've got to be consistent. If I slam Tomlin for his lack of playoff success lately, I got to be consistent and say the same thing about John Harbaugh. So I would not have put him 5. I would put his brother ahead of him, and that's why I'm going to put Jim Harbaugh 6. Even though he has not coached an NFL game in a very long time, he hasn't failed as an NFL head coach. There's like, other than his final year in San Francisco, where it's not like they were a dog crap team and the falling out with Balky, the GM there, short of that, he's been spectacular. You go to an NFC championship game year 1 after Mike Singletary couldn't win diddly poo with Alex Smith. And if not for Kyle Williams, right? Is Kyle, not Kyle, what's the old White Sox president's kid's name who blundered those punt
Kenny
returns?
Williams. Kenny
Kevin,
Williams.
what's his name?
Kenny Williams is the old
Kenny
White Sox. Yeah.
And then his kid
Yeah.
F that game up. If not for that, they would have beat the Giants and they would have gone to the Super Bowl in 2011 and played New England. And then to go there the next year with Kaepernick, got the most out of Kaepernick. I know it's been a while. Maybe the game's passed him by a little bit. He's getting compared to Will Ferrell by Denzel Perryman. He is 6 on my list.
He was 6 on my list.
Look at us.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. This one you're gonna hate. I know you're gonna hate this one. Dan Campbell.
Yep, you're right.
Dude, is there any team in the NFL that takes on the personality of its coach more than the Lions take on the personality of Dan Campbell?
And wins.
What?
Takes on the personality and wins.
And wins. The guy, listen, it's an X's and O's league. Some of this stuff feels like it should have an expiration date on it, but it doesn't. Do I think it's insane that he went for 2 from the 7-yard line? Yeah. But you know who didn't? His players. They fully have bought in to all of it. They dance and bob and weave before kickoffs. They talk shit. They say we are going to be aggressive. They are tough. They love him. Ben Johnson just keeps not leaving. It's a remarkable thing. Like, part of the job of being an NFL head coach is leader of men. And this guy is a vibe. He's a personality. And I can't argue. I mean, finished unbelievably strong amidst resiliency 2 years ago. Backed it up from week 1 through the NFC playoffs last year. Could have been in the Super Bowl. His players love him. His coaches don't leave. I got to give it to him. Dan Campbell, number 7.
It's a great, I've used the argument, what have you done for me lately with LaFleur? So you can throw that back in my face with Campbell because he did the impossible. They won more playoff games this year than they have like in the entire history of the franchise. So that's great. I mean, that's terrific. And I just have a bad taste in my mouth from the way that NFC Championship game ended. But then again, to go back to Kyle Shanahan point, it did happen in the NFC Championship game, and he did do it with the Lions. This guy gets on my nerves a lot too, but I think he did the same thing with the team he coaches, and that's McDermott, because they had the longest NFL playoff drought in the league when he took over there. He got them over the hump, and that was even before Josh Allen took over at quarterback. That was with Tyrod Taylor when they lost to Jacksonville in 2017. And yeah, 13 seconds was atrocious against the Chiefs. And I feel like every year there's at least one moment in a playoff game where I want to pin it on him for not being up to snuff. But they rallied in the second half of the season when people were bringing up that Tyler Dunn story nonstop. They had a ton of injuries. We know that. Diggs ended up being a bit of a malcontent. That's probably on the coach, actually. But I don't know, man. Yeah, part of it is Josh Allen. He also drafted Josh Allen, and they win 12 games every year. And they win a playoff game every year, too, by the way. They win a playoff game every single year there. So
wow. So this is the first pick that like he was not in my top 10. He would not have been in my top 12. The defense consistently overachieves even without a ton of blue chip talent, and they still overachieved when they lost Tremaine Edmonds and all of that. They've had coaching turnover, obviously, with Dable and Dorsey and everything that's happened there.
Leslie Frazier,
yep. I think I have two. I think Josh Allen's the second best player in football. I think he's the second best quarterback in football. And it's hard for me to wonder what it would be like if Sean McDermott coached a team without that truly elite player. So that maybe I ding him unfairly for that, because his side of the ball does tend to overachieve based on talent and financial investment. And he is the head coach, but too much weird stuff.
Let me ask you a question, though, about everything you're saying there. Other than winning the Super Bowl in 2012, which is a long time ago, what makes John Harbaugh a better coach than Sean McDermott right now?
I think that what I said about the coordinator hires is pretty significant in terms of the guys that have come through there and had success or been in demand elsewhere and stayed and had success. Like, they've won in a multitude of ways, I guess, in Baltimore, whereas he's won with Josh Allen.
Well, the only thing I'll say about Josh Allen is I think McDermott gets a little bit of credit, even though he's not the GM, because they made the aggressive move to get him while he was there. And they also had to, and part of it is Allen taking it upon himself, but he did not start off as a CJ Stroud, Andrew Luck, Ben Roethlisberger type, Patrick Mahomes type quarterback who had immediate success. He turned himself into, in your words, the second best player in the NFL in that incubator.
Yeah. All right, we'll keep it moving here. This is where it gets a little dicey for me on some of the rankings, but I'm gonna put Mike McDaniel at number 9. I know the arguments against him, but
if the seasons end in on Thanksgiving, I would put him in the top 10.
I get it. But also, he's got a quarterback who maybe just can't play in the cold, and their entire pass rush got injured in December. Like, that team fell apart in a multitude of ways late in the season. I can't put it all on coaching. Tua's never won a game where the temperature is 45 degrees or lower, and they suffered all of those injuries late. So I think that there are circumstances there that are beyond his control. He did unlock Tua, and part of it, I love listening to the guy.
My God, you're giving me the Big Bang Theory coach take here, that because he's like the smart, the fun nerd, the cool football nerd.
Everything that he says feels funny and smart and relatable, and that's not just to the media. That's in the mic'd up videos, the sideline interactions, the NFL film stuff that you see. This is projecting a bit, but he's like the coach that I would want to play for if I was good enough to be in the NFL. There's something there. And he's so young that he unlocked Tua. He'd be high on my list, if I was projecting outwards and starting a team. So I got Mike McDaniel at 9.
All right. You're probably going to think this one's batty, and I don't even know if you have this guy in your top 20. I'm going to put Sean Payton 10. And here's what I want you to do.
He would have been he's in my top 15.
When was the last time he had a bad year as a coach?
Does last year count?
They went 8-9.
I know that.
Based on the situation he inherited, what we thought of Russell Wilson after the year prior, the season started 0-4 with a 50-point loss.
Yeah.
He benched the guy. We know that. And they lost games at the end of the year in Houston to New England. But if I'm grading that season for him as a coach, I give it a B-. You know, in the last year in New Orleans, they went through all kinds of quarterbacks. Ian Book started games. I think they still won 9 games. Before that, it was 13 wins, 13 wins, 13 wins. He's prickly and he's annoying at times, and he's not everyone's favorite coach. And he seems to, play the media like a fiddle and leak stuff and try to put himself over and make excuses and everything else. But I think he's a tremendous. There's nothing about his track record that tells me he's not one of the best coaches in the league.
I will be picking the name that people are probably screaming in their car and on their Peloton now, that how could we claim he's not a top 10 coach, when we come back on First and Pod after this. All right. Thank you for hanging out on First and Pod. We're ranking NFL head coaches. I wrote down on a sheet of paper before the show, and I'll hold it up to the camera here. It says, me, Tomlin. Because I knew there was no scenario in which Andrew Fillipponi, Mike Tomlin's #1 critic, would be drafting Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin is going to go 11 here. He is a top 10 head coach. The playoff success recently has been what it's been. But, dude, he's never had a losing season.
Oh, here we go.
Dude, he's never had a losing season. And am I wrong? Did you guys win 10 games last year with Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett, and Mitch Trubisky?
Yeah.
Okay. Never had a losing season. 10 wins with that grouping of quarterbacks. Feel like Arthur Smith should be a pretty significant upgrade over Matt Canada. So I'm leader of
men.
You
just said over Matt Canada. Tomlin was the guy that kept Matt Canada around and dug himself a hole last year that you're now giving him credit for digging himself out of.
Hey, man, when you've been around that long, you're not going to be perfect. I'm not saying he's perfect, but when would you have taken him is my question. If it was an Andrew Fillipponi coach power rankings, when would you have taken the guy that you rail against every day on the radio?
I probably would have taken him around 15. There's 2 coaches for sure that I have ahead of him, and there's a few that I have in the same cluster, but one that I absolutely have ahead of him, and I think he, again, one of these guys that because of an injury had his stock go up last year, even though his team didn't make the playoffs, and that's Zach Taylor. With Jake Browning in there, they were still a very competitive team. They won 9 games with a journeyman quarterback. He at times looked better than that, where he was completing 70+% of his passes and making throws downfield. And he's the only coach that's going right now that's beaten Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes in a big spot, because Bruce Arians and Tom Brady and Bill Belichick are no longer in the NFL. So he's an offensive mind. He's got offensive coaches now like Brian Callahan that are getting taken by other teams as head coaches. So full resume, Tomlin is better than Zach Taylor. But if you look at the last 3 or 4 years, I don't even think it's remotely close between the 2 guys. One's gone to a Super Bowl. One's gone to 2 AFC championship games. And Tomlin hasn't won a playoff game since 2016. So Taylor 12.
Well, we're going to wrap up the AFC North then in the top 13 picks. Kevin Stefanski, 13. The guy was the coach of the year last year. And his team gave up more draft capital than ever for a quarterback who didn't play. And when he played, he was bad. And Joe Flacco outplayed him. And they won 11 games. And I saw this stat when I was just kind of doing some reading on this stuff. Browns became the first team since 1970 in the merger to play a playoff game without their week 1 starting quarterback, running back, left tackle, and right tackle. Browns players who consisted of 27% of the team's salary cap ended the year on injured reserve, highest of any playoff team. That guy got dealt a brutal hand.
And they started 5 quarterbacks.
Yeah. Guy got dealt a brutal hand last year and won 11 games. So the reigning coach of the year who doesn't have an excellent quarterback and just wins, he definitely deserves to be regarded as a top half of the NFL coach. Kevin Stefanski off the board.
Yeah, I still have misgivings about him, though. But what you said about last year in a vacuum, I have a hard time poking holes in it. They did get crushed in the playoff game, but to have the corpse of Joe Flacco out there throwing for 300-plus yards and 3 touchdowns in a handful of games in December when the guy was picking his kids up from school before that and flying economy to Cleveland to sign with them. Yes. Which, by the way, a Steelers rookie was on my flight from L.A. to Pittsburgh, and he was in first class. So, Flacco, what the F's going on, man?
He was flying Southwest, buddy. No first class. It's a meritocracy. He probably, had priority boarding, took an exit row on Southwest, maybe a little drink ticket. But, yeah, he was flying Southwest. Man of the people, Joe Flacco.
I hate Southwest's whole flying system. The whole line, and you've got to line up behind people and ask them and butt in and say, hey, what's your number? Because this is where I am. And, oh, wait, let me move up here. Oh, you're ahead of me. Let me move back. I hate that. So, anyways, Mike McCarthy next. Your dude.
The Big other Mike. Name on my sheet of paper, Pony McCarthy.
Yeah.
Just pre-podcast predictions. There was no scenario you were taking Tomlin, and there was no scenario I was taking McCarthy.
Which I don't really get with you because you, I thought, took great pains last year on our weekly shows after games to say, hey, I got to tip you don't wear a hat ever, but I got to tip why don't you wear hats?
I wear hats when I golf.
Okay. And you said, I just got to give some love to Mike McCarthy.
Yeah.
Their offense, he took over the play calling. Offensive juggernaut last year. Dak Prescott has the best year of his career. CeeDee Lamb's a monster. Blah, 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 blah. This is not, your uncle's Mike McCarthy. Maybe he's turned over a new leaf. And now after the Green Bay playoff loss, you said he's untouchable and he's radioactive and nuclear in this process. And taking Mike Tomlin over him, who he lost to in Super Bowl, and McCarthy's had more success in January than Tomlin lately.
Yeah. I just don't like him.
He's honestly, though, in terms of guys who I would probably get along with and relate to, he's one of the most likable humans.
No.
You don't think so? He's an everyman.
Nah, he's a
You don't see, Kevin James should have played him in a movie, not Sean Payton.
Yeah. Great regular season success, nothing in the playoffs ever since he's been in Dallas. Stale, fraudulent in Green Bay. I'll never forgive him for those field goals inside the 5-yard line with Aaron Rodgers against Seattle in the NFC Championship game. It cost me money.
That's like your Bill Belichick costing you the Survivor Pool.
Yeah, that's right. I hold grudges against NFL
yes,
head
you
coaches.
Will take a personal vendetta and have it affect the.
He won one Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. That's not very good. DeMeco Ryans, number 15. Off the board.
Mm-hmm.
Part of this is buying stock in a guy who's young, who seems unbelievably charismatic, but also obviously had a ton of success as a coordinator with the Niners. We talked about it a ton on the pod last year. There were a lot of options for Coach of the Year. There were a lot of them. And so he was a finalist, but he didn't win. But there's probably no one in the NFL who exceeded preseason expectations more than DeMeco Ryans. I know Bobby Slowick gets credit for that. I know CJ Stroud gets credit for that. But we're not drafting coordinators. We're not drafting quarterbacks. I can't say that DeMeco Ryans doesn't deserve to be a top half of the NFL head coach based on what I saw last year.
Yeah, tough because it's only 1 year, but it was just a A+ start to a coaching career. And so,
and we both like them this year.
Yep. I love it.
It's not like we think it was fluky or fraudulent.
You're right. Okay, so that's 15. This one I gave a lot of thought to, and I'm curious to hear how you feel about it. I'm going to put Dan Quinn 16.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to put Dan Quinn 16 because as time has gone on, we've not really seen him coach much since In 17, they win a playoff game in LA and they lose in the division round of the playoffs. And then shortly thereafter, things fall apart. He starts off 0-5. He gets fired midseason. That would have been in the 2020 season where they let him go midseason. But as time has gone on, I think I appreciate especially the 2016 Super Bowl run, even though they choked and blew a 28-3 lead. He had that team in the Super Bowl. And he got Kyle Shanahan there. He had the smarts to hire him. So, and he was, gets impeccable reviews as a defensive coordinator. Thought of as like one of the elite defensive minds at his, calling, defensive coaching. And he's a coach that's been to a Super Bowl. So I'm going to give him some love and say that he's an average NFL head coach on this list and put him 16. Having not seen him in a few years, but what he did in Atlanta overall, did he succeed or fail? He succeeded with flying colors there with the Falcons.
I think this gets much harder I think it's much easier for us to rank good coaches than it is to rank bad coaches. I don't know if you feel that way, but it's certainly how I feel.
I think it's more fun to rank the bad ones, but I get it.
That's fine, but I'm saying
I like splitting the terrible hairs.
Yeah. So I got these guys more in tears. I don't think we're at the terrible stage yet, though.
No, you're right.
I'm going to give you another guy, and so this is similar to my last pick. I'm going on like you're doing it with Quinn on like projection, coordinator should be better than the last time, all that stuff. I'm going to go small sample size, liked what I saw, overachieved, and a guy who I think is a pretty good bet for coach of the year this year, Shane Steichen.
Yeah.
If it's probably unlikely that Anthony Richardson's going to win MVP, but we talked about him as a long shot bet that we wouldn't hate having. But if he's fifth in MVP, Shane Steichen could win coach of the year. They improved over 6 points per game in terms of points per game scored from 2022 to 2023. And Anthony Richardson got hurt. He did it with our guy Gardner Minshew. I just think that was a very impressive coaching job when we did not know really what to make of all the Eagles coordinators getting those jobs with him and Gannon. And the Colts, we've talked about it. It's not a team that's going to get a lot of love on any of the national shows, market size and all of that. But I think they should be a very fun team to watch. I think that they, in a really sneaky AFC South, that's going to be tough to pick this year in terms of power rank the teams after Houston. Like, I think there's a real chance that Indy is better than Jacksonville this year and is fighting for a wild card spot in 10 wins this year. So I'm going to put Shane Steichen here.
Okay. The logic of where you put him makes complete sense to me, but based on what you've said on some previous shows, I'm very surprised that you've allowed for one guy to last this long, and I'm not going to take him with this pick. I'll let you come back around and tell me why you waited this long to pick him with your next pick. I'm going to go Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson.
I know who you're referring to.
Doug Peterson will be my next pick. If we had done this podcast in May of 2023, I think he easily would have been in the top 10 because the Eagles Super Bowl would still be somewhat on our minds. And what he did getting Jacksonville to the playoffs, coming back and winning the Chargers game, respectable showing against the Chiefs in the divisional game. And it just the last 4 or 5 games of the season were a disaster. But, still had a winning season in Jacksonville. Hasn't really looked like the game has passed him by there whatsoever. So 18, but a big year for him, I think. The The Jags, if they don't bounce back this year, then I think what he did in Philadelphia, winning a Super Bowl, is going to look more and more like an outlier. And his place in NFL history will be similar to maybe like a Brian Billick or somebody like that. Coaches that won Super Bowls that are not really viewed as, special coaches. So 18 for Peterson.
Yeah, listen, I like Peterson. He's accomplished a lot, but he's on the hot seat in Jacksonville this year. This is probably too low for Kevin O'Connell. I'll take Kevin O'Connell at 19. You're right. It is too low. I maybe got a little too cute with some of my projections. Maybe it's because I think that they're obviously taking a step back this year with losing Cousins, but I actually just heard from like a very respected football voice that's in the NFL as an executive that he's positive that the second best quarterback in this draft was JJ McCarthy. And I wish he would have told me that before the draft. But
when I tried to like regurgitate some of that stuff to you, you didn't seem to want to listen to it. And now this random ass NFL executive says it to you. And Danny Parkins is like, well, I got
to trust my sources over yours.
But all it took is one man's opinion for you to be I don't see anything special in JJ McCarthy.
I'm just saying.
He managed the offense at Michigan. They ran the ball and played great defense. He had to make 2 or 3 throws a game.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I'm open to the possibility of being wrong. You got to be able.
You're not even being wrong now. You're just now you've replaced your own opinion with this man's opinion.
No. I'm not. No. I still stand by my own opinion. What I'm saying,
you should have said that to the executive. Well, I disagree with you. I think you'll be very wrong here. He's going to suck.
If they're right, they have a great play caller who got something out of Dobbs last year when Cousins was hurt, and they're going to pay Jefferson, and you'll have Jefferson and Hawkinson and Addison with a good rookie quarterback and a good play caller and a good coach. So, I mean, this guy has a 13-win season on his resume without, elite quarterback talent, even though he has gotten elite quarterback production when he's been healthy. And, I do think he's a very good coach. The 0-1 postseason record, not a large sample size there. I think he's an overachiever, which is what you want out of a coach. He's definitely better than 19.
20 for me is Nick Sirianni, another one of how the mighty has fallen. He would have been in the top 5.
And on the hot seat.
Yep, he would have been in the top 5 last year, crying before the Super Bowl and everything else. And even halfway through this season with their undefeated record, and they lose to the Jets, but other than that, they were pretty much perfect. And with the tush push and everything else, you could cut and paste a lot of what I said about Doug Peterson here on Nick Sirianni. It looked like, and this is why I'm happy you put Steichen ahead of him. It seems like the brains of the operation were probably departed and left for Indianapolis. However, I think they hired good coordinators this offseason. And the roster, I think, is still top 10 in the NFL. Don't be surprised if Sirianni is back in our top 10 or 12 best coaches in the league after this year. And if they just make the playoffs or lose in the first round, I do think he's done. I think they'll get rid of him and they'll bring in someone else because they've had such good success there, moving on from coaches and finding guys thereafter who go on and do a lot of winning. So,
yeah, I mean, there'll be a team that's mentioned for Bill Belichick.
Yep. I don't think they'll do it because I don't think Howie Roseman wants to cede that power over to Bill.
I don't know that Bill's going to want personnel control.
We'll see how much he's able to win people over by doing the Manning casts and McAfee stuff, which people might laugh at that, but I absolutely think the personality he displays publicly will go a long way in softening owners, especially on the idea of bringing him in and working with him. in 2025.
All right.
More First and Pod right after this.
Oh, thank you. All right, back in on First and Pod. This is where it gets down to the nitty-gritty. This is where we have gross decisions to make. The bottom third of coaches in the NFL. Antonio Pierce off the board.
I got some questions for you.
Okay. I mean, it's a small sample. They let the players pick the head coach, but I don't know that they're going to have a lot of success given the quarterback situation. But he went 5-4. He beat the Chargers. He beat the Chiefs. The players like him. It's the small sample size, but I've got to at least say, in terms of the coaches that are left, he has shown maybe a higher upside, and like they won because of him. You know, like these other guys feel like they're more like along for the ride, or whatever happens is more in spite of. Antonio Pierce had a positive impact, unquestionably, on his football team, and they overachieved compared to what they were getting with the exact same roster and the exact same players with Josh McDaniels before him. So Antonio Pierce.
I think it's completely disrespectful that you put him ahead of the guy I'm taking at 22, and that's Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles won a playoff game last year. If Todd Bowles was an offensive coach and not someone with a defensive resume, he would have gone in the top 20 picks for sure. But we ascribe Baker Mayfield's success to other people. And I really don't think that that's entirely fair. He was seen as dead man walking when the season started. You brought up Houston overachieving. Tampa Bay was looked at as a team that was going to win 5 or 6 games. And they were one of the last 8 teams standing. And there's another coach that did that the year before who's still left out there. But with the Bucks, even in a weak division, they were their record, like they were a legitimate winning team. They did not have some fluky point differential, or they just had a tendency to win 1-score games, and that's the only reason why they made the playoffs. They earned it, and then they went out and they kicked ass in the first round and embarrassed Philadelphia, and were good, I thought. I mean, they did not go to Detroit and get punked. So I'm putting Bulls 22.
I'll put Matt Eberflus 23.
Okay, so this is why I brought up the Antonio Pierce thing to you. You are a man that believes that the Bears are going to do a lot this year and win a ton.
Yeah.
And yet you ranked an interim coach who has very minuscule accomplishments in the league ahead of a guy who you think is destined to be the shepherd of a team that wins like 11 or 12 games this year and makes the playoffs.
Dude, great players matter more than great coaches. Mike McCarthy won a Super Bowl. John Fox won a Super Bowl. You can be carried by the power of your roster. What's Bill Belichick without Tom Brady? So Matt Eberflus is, the defense got better when he called the plays and took that over. But they also got Montez Sweat. They got healthy in the secondary, and they beat bad quarterbacks. The culture is there. The players seem to like him, all of that stuff. But it's, other than Dan Campbell seems like it's a force of personality thing. Matt Eberflus feels like it's a little bit more like gimmicky high school. He has the HITS principle, HITS, hustle, intensity, takeaways, smart situational football. Like it feels like it's a little bit more of a house of cards, his leadership style. So I do give him credit for the defense and taking over the play calling, but his defensive coordinator left in disgrace and secrecy, which is why he had to take over the defensive play calling. So I think he could win Coach of the Year, like how Matt Nagy won Coach of the Year. which was powered by Vic Fangio's defense when they had 36 takeaways, but Matt Nagy won it, and he could just win it because he gets carried by the strength of his roster. Or I think Caleb could be good, but the team underachieves and wins 7 or 8 games, and he gets fired at the end of the year. Like, I think both outcomes are on the table. And by the way, he's a co-favorite with Jim Harbaugh for Coach of the Year right now, preseason, because of the hype around his team. I just personally haven't seen enough yet to believe it's because of him and not with him being along for the ride.
I'm going to take Raheem Morris 24th. There are a lot of NFL coaches who think this is a long time coming, and two of the ones that are his biggest proponents and biggest advocates are McVay and Tomlin. What is very unique about Raheem Morris is that after he was the head coach in Tampa Bay at a very young age, he made a transition to the offensive side of the ball, and he coached offense. And then after that, he went to LA and was the defensive coordinator for the team that won the Super Bowl. So I like that there is some depth and some versatility to him as a coach. And we've seen guys who get a second chance who end up doing much better, who learn from their previous mistakes. Belichick is obviously one of the most famous examples of that. So I think it was deserving that he got a job. I was stunned that they picked him over some of the other candidates for that job. But like you saying about Eberflus, they are in a division. They are in a situation where they could make the playoffs this year, and we could still have some doubt about his credibility as an NFL head coach.
This next one is partly because you and I have been talking about buying stock in them for this year. So this is a bit of a projection. But based on how Philly finished 2 years ago, I thought that this was one of the most ridiculous hires ever. But Jonathan Gannon, they did play hard for him, and they won 4 games. This is true. But they beat Dallas. They beat your Steelers in Pittsburgh.
Yep, I was there.
They beat Philly in Philly. I know that was in the midst of Philly's late season collapse, but still, the wins were good. They did cover spreads. They were plucky. And so you get fully healthy, full season Kyler, all of the draft pick infusion, second year of system. We think this is an over team this year, and we're ranking bottom 7 coaches in the NFL 48 minutes into this podcast. I'm going to put Jonathan Gannon at 25.
I think Giants fans believe that Brian Daboll's a good coach, and that's why I'm going to put him 26.
I was debating between those two.
And we have, in a roundabout way, given him kudos because you mentioned with Buffalo how, maybe the Josh Allen success, or some of it was due in part to Daboll's coaching, and Kyle and Dorsey was just not on the same level. Daniel Jones. Now, the Giants overall in 2022 were a mirage, were a paper champion team. But Daniel Jones, despite not throwing a lot of touchdown passes, he was a much better quarterback. And to Daboll's credit, he utilized the legs and the athleticism of Jones better than any coach before him. And that part of Daniel Jones's game turned into a real threat. And by the way, they had nobody to throw the ball to. Isaiah Hodgins, who they had picked up from the Bills, was their best receiver. So I think last year he took a step back. The injuries there and playing guys like DeVito at quarterback, it's hard to analyze coaches in those situations. But then again, we've touched on a ton of coaches last year that made do with backup quarterbacks. So it's weird. I mean, it's a little bit reminiscent of what happened with McAdoo with the Giants, where in year 1 they made the playoffs and the New York media was convinced the guy was a good coach, and then it fell off a cliff after that. And I think there's a chance that happens with Daboll, Danny. I mean, if they go like 5-12, I believe he's going to get fired there, and it's going to be another short stint for a Giants head coach.
This is the part of the pod where we get in trouble here. I think not that there's no consequences, but I'm going to just say Mike McDonald. Like, I don't know. He's never been a head coach, but are we going to say that all of the first-time head coaches have to be last, or are we going to put them all together in a ranking? Like, this guy's the youngest head coach in the NFL. He's 36 years old. He's a defensive wonderkin. Like, Baltimore's defense was first in points, first in takeaways, first in sacks. I like him more than the other guys left on the board in terms of upside and you know what I mean? Like I obviously can't prove it, but unless we're going to say that all of the first-time head coaches can't be ranked or they have to be ranked dead last, I'd rather have Mike McDonald as my coach than Robert Saleh.
Yeah, that's why I'm not going to take Saleh either. I'm going to take Canales at 28, the recovering porn addict. Yeah. And I'm going to do that because among the coaches that got jobs here, I think I am personally more impressed with what he did with that Tampa Bay offense than what McDonald did with Baltimore's defensive players. To get Mayfield to the 30 touchdown number, to get the Buccaneers to help them get to a playoff victory. And then in Seattle before that, he was Geno Smith's quarterback's coach. So I like this guy's resume, and I am actually interested to see what he does with Bryce Young this year.
So I think I now know how this is going to end with the two guys who are going to be 31 and 32. So I'll just take Brian Callahan in Tennessee, go with the pedigree. But this is real tough because, it's a first-time offensive coordinator, a first-time defensive coordinator, a first-time head coach, and a first-time play caller. So I don't know.
He does have his dad coaching the offensive line, and he's one of the best of all time at that.
Exactly. So I will go with pedigree, call it nepotism, whatever you want to say. But Brian Callahan, 29. Congratulations for not having an NA next to your name.
I'm going with Dennis Allen.
Oh, wow.
30. Yeah.
I thought he was going to be 31 or 32. Okay.
Yeah, Dennis Allen is 30 for me. It's not like they went 5-12 last year. They did win 9 games. It was ugly. I thought they, at times, underachieved, and they should have been a shoo-in to win the division. I picked them to win the division before the season started. I thought they were kind of a dark horse team. I was still a Derek Carr guy. That changed last year, and he barely survived. If they lose the last game of the year to Atlanta and finish 8-9, I think he gets fired instead of Arthur Smith, and he's out. That's how much that game. It shouldn't have meant that much, but I think finishing with a winning season had him avoid the executioner. So 30 for Dennis Allen. But among coaches, I don't know if you've seen this prop, like coaches who could be fired in season, first coach to be fired, I think I'd put him 1.
Yeah,
going into this year, even ahead of Robert Saleh.
Well, the Jets' schedule is pretty easy, so I could see Saleh like having like a inflated record if Rodgers and the guys actually stay healthy for a while in season, and then be tougher for him to be fired in season. But I'll just make the point now so we can keep it moving. But when Saleh comes off the board, which will be at 32, like if he doesn't have the juice to fire Nathaniel Hackett, and he's 18 and 33 or 34, whatever he is, he's got 18 wins in 3 years. Saleh deserves to be dead last. So I'll say Gerard Mayo at 31. He's replacing Bill Belichick. It's not easy, but young.
The NFL has a minority coaching issue, and it has for a long time, and that's why Brian Flores filed the lawsuit. And Flores had enough success in Miami where I think he should have been given another head coaching opportunity by now, and overall did a extraordinary job with Minnesota's defense, getting it from dead last to pretty respectable last year. That all being said, I was not a fan whatsoever of the process in New England that led to Mayo getting hired as head coach, it just kind of felt like to me that they were just extending the Bill Belichick program. You know, we're Syracuse alums. Just kind of like, okay, Boeheim's getting pushed out the door. He's a legend. So let's just keep it going by promoting one of his assistants who's been here for a while. You know, I know it's hard replacing a legend. You don't want to be that guy, the old cliche. But my personal opinion, if I were Robert and Jonathan Kraft, I would have wanted to cast the widest net possible and looked way outside of my comfort zone to find the next head coach there, given the way New England has performed in the post-Brady era.
All right, so Robert Saleh off the board at 32.
Yep. He sucks.
He does suck. Yeah, 18 and 33. Nathaniel Hackett gets some blame. Zach Wilson gets some blame, but congratulations. Someone had to be last. Thank you to Spencer Ray, our producer. Tell a friend about it. Send someone a link. Send someone a link and say, hey, check out this great NFL podcast. Then screenshot that to Pony and I, and we'll retweet you. So prove to us that you're still listening and that you're doing the good work and spreading the love of First and Pod. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.